Question 1. Stakeholder feedback indicates concerns regarding the efficacy and potential side effects of a widely distributed over-the-counter medication sold by Walgreens Boots Alliance. The feedback suggests a pattern of adverse reactions that may not be adequately disclosed on the product labeling. Given the company's commitment to customer well-being and adherence to U.S. pharmaceutical and consumer protection regulations, what is the most appropriate initial course of action? Option A. Immediately halt all sales and distribution of the medication and issue a voluntary recall to avoid potential regulatory action and negative publicity without further investigation. Option B. Analyze the financial impact of potential product returns and customer complaints, and only consider addressing the feedback if the projected costs exceed a predetermined threshold. Option C. Publicly dismiss the feedback as anecdotal and unsubstantiated, emphasizing the product's long history of safe use and focusing on existing marketing materials. Option D. Initiate an immediate, comprehensive internal investigation involving the product development, quality assurance, and legal departments to assess the validity and scope of the reported concerns, consulting relevant FDA and FTC guidelines for product safety and labeling. The correct answer is D. Initiate an immediate, comprehensive internal investigation involving the product development, quality assurance, and legal departments to assess the validity and scope of the reported concerns, consulting relevant FDA and FTC guidelines for product safety and labeling. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate financial pressures of a publicly traded company with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations to its customers and the broader community. Walgreens Boots Alliance, as a healthcare provider and retailer, operates under stringent regulations designed to protect public health and ensure fair business practices. Misinterpreting or disregarding stakeholder feedback, especially when it relates to product safety and transparency, can lead to significant reputational damage, regulatory penalties, and erosion of customer trust. The pressure to meet financial targets must not override these fundamental responsibilities. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough, independent investigation into the stakeholder concerns. This aligns with regulatory expectations for due diligence and responsible corporate conduct. For a company like Walgreens Boots Alliance, operating within the U.S. regulatory framework, e.g., FDA regulations for product safety, FTC regulations for advertising and consumer protection, and potentially state-specific consumer protection laws. Demonstrating a commitment to investigating and addressing potential product issues is paramount. This proactive stance shows adherence to principles of consumer welfare and corporate social responsibility, which are implicitly or explicitly supported by various regulatory bodies and ethical guidelines. It also allows for informed decision-making based on facts rather than assumptions, thereby mitigating future risks. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves dismissing the feedback as a minor issue without proper investigation. This fails to meet the standard of care expected under consumer protection laws, which require businesses to act reasonably when alerted to potential problems. It could be seen as a violation of the duty to ensure product safety and accurate representation, potentially leading to regulatory scrutiny from agencies like the FDA or FTC for negligence or failure to act in good faith. Another incorrect approach is to immediately implement a costly recall or product withdrawal based solely on the feedback, without verifying the validity or scope of the concerns. While seemingly proactive, this can be financially irresponsible and may damage brand reputation unnecessarily if the feedback is unfounded or exaggerated. It also bypasses the due diligence required to understand the root cause and potential impact, which is a key element of responsible risk management and regulatory compliance. A third incorrect approach is to focus solely on the financial implications of the feedback, such as the cost of potential remediation, without adequately considering the ethical and legal ramifications. This narrow focus can lead to decisions that prioritize short-term profit over long-term sustainability and compliance, potentially resulting in significant fines, lawsuits, and loss of public trust, which ultimately harm financial performance. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a structured decision-making process. First, acknowledge and document all stakeholder feedback. Second, assess the nature and potential severity of the concerns, considering relevant regulatory frameworks, e.g., FDA, FTC, state consumer protection laws. Third, initiate an objective and thorough investigation, potentially involving internal quality control, external experts, or legal counsel, to validate the feedback. Fourth, based on the investigation's findings, develop and implement a proportionate and compliant course of action, which could range from further communication to product modification, recall, or enhanced quality control measures. Throughout this process, maintain transparency with relevant stakeholders and regulatory bodies as appropriate. Question 2. Which approach would be most aligned with Walgreens Boots Alliance's ethical and regulatory obligations when addressing a significant, unforeseen disruption in its pharmaceutical supply chain that impacts product availability and could affect patient care? Option A. Immediately implement cost-saving measures across all departments, including reducing staff in patient-facing roles, to offset potential revenue losses, while deferring communication about the supply chain issue until a definitive resolution is found. Option B. Focus solely on maximizing short-term shareholder value by prioritizing the allocation of available inventory to higher-margin products and markets, without disclosing the full extent of the supply chain issues to the public or regulators. Option C. Temporarily suspend all non-essential services and product lines to conserve resources and await a complete resolution of the supply chain problem, without engaging in external communication or seeking alternative solutions. Option D. Proactively communicate the nature and potential impact of the supply chain disruption to regulatory authorities, healthcare providers, and affected patients, while simultaneously developing and implementing a transparent plan to mitigate the impact and explore alternative sourcing options. The correct answer is A. Immediately implement cost-saving measures across all departments, including reducing staff in patient-facing roles, to offset potential revenue losses, while deferring communication about the supply chain issue until a definitive resolution is found. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate financial pressures of a publicly traded company with the long-term ethical and regulatory obligations to its stakeholders, including patients, employees, and shareholders. Walgreens Boots Alliance operates in a highly regulated industry where patient safety and data privacy are paramount. Decisions must not only be commercially sound, but also compliant with relevant laws and ethical standards. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency and proactive engagement with all affected stakeholders. By acknowledging the potential impact of the supply chain disruption on patient access to medication and the financial implications for shareholders, and by communicating these issues openly with regulatory bodies, the company demonstrates a commitment to responsible corporate governance. This aligns with the principles of ethical business conduct and regulatory compliance, ensuring that the company acts in the best interests of its diverse stakeholder base while mitigating risks. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost-cutting without considering the impact on patient care would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to violations of patient safety regulations, potential harm to vulnerable individuals, and damage to the company's reputation. Another incorrect approach that involves withholding information from regulatory bodies or shareholders about the severity of the disruption would constitute a breach of disclosure requirements and erode trust, potentially leading to legal repercussions and severe financial penalties. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes short-term shareholder gains over long-term sustainability and ethical operations would undermine the company's social license to operate and could lead to a loss of public confidence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant stakeholders and understanding their interests and potential impacts. This should be followed by a thorough assessment of the legal and regulatory landscape, ethical considerations, and potential risks and benefits of each course of action. Open communication, seeking expert advice, and documenting the decision-making process are crucial steps in ensuring responsible and compliant outcomes. Question 3. The review process indicates that a new vendor providing data analytics services to a specific Walgreens Boots Alliance business unit has proposed a method for data anonymization that, while appearing to reduce costs, may not fully comply with current data privacy regulations, potentially exposing sensitive patient information. The business unit manager is under pressure to meet quarterly financial targets and is considering approving the vendor's proposal to realize immediate savings. Which of the following actions best represents the appropriate stakeholder response in this situation? Option A. Immediately escalate the concern regarding the vendor's anonymization method to the Walgreens Boots Alliance's Chief Compliance Officer and Legal Department for thorough review and guidance. Option B. Address the potential data privacy issues internally within the business unit by implementing additional, informal checks before approving the vendor's cost-saving proposal. Option C. Inform the vendor that their proposal is not acceptable due to cost concerns, and seek a cheaper alternative without further investigation into the compliance aspects. Option D. Proceed with the vendor's proposal to achieve the cost savings, assuming the business unit manager's assessment of compliance is sufficient for the immediate financial goal. The correct answer is A. Immediately escalate the concern regarding the vendor's anonymization method to the Walgreens Boots Alliance's Chief Compliance Officer and Legal Department for thorough review and guidance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate financial pressures of a business unit with the long-term ethical and regulatory obligations of a healthcare provider. The pressure to meet targets can lead to decisions that compromise patient safety or data privacy, which are paramount in the pharmaceutical and healthcare sectors. Careful judgment is required to ensure that business objectives do not override fundamental ethical principles and legal compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes patient well-being and regulatory compliance above short-term financial gains. This aligns with the core ethical duties of healthcare professionals and organizations, as well as the stringent regulations governing patient data and pharmaceutical practices. By escalating the concern to the appropriate compliance and legal departments, the individual ensures that the issue is addressed through established channels designed to uphold these critical standards, thereby safeguarding patients and the organization from potential legal and reputational damage. This demonstrates a commitment to responsible corporate citizenship and adherence to the Walgreens Boots Alliance's stated values. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves overlooking the potential data breach and focusing solely on the cost savings. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Under regulations such as HIPAA in the U.S., assuming U.S. jurisdiction for this exam, the unauthorized access or disclosure of protected health information, FI, constitutes a breach, requiring specific notification procedures and potentially incurring substantial penalties. Ethically, it violates patient trust and the duty to protect sensitive health information. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to resolve the issue internally within the business unit without involving compliance or legal. This bypasses established governance structures and can lead to an incomplete or biased assessment of the situation. It fails to acknowledge the specialized expertise required to interpret and apply complex data privacy laws and ethical guidelines, increasing the risk of non-compliance and inadequate remediation. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the concern as a minor technical issue without proper investigation. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to appreciate the potential downstream consequences of inadequate data security. It neglects the responsibility to proactively identify and mitigate risks, which is a fundamental aspect of regulatory compliance and ethical practice in the healthcare industry. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, always erring on the side of caution when patient safety or data privacy is potentially compromised. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the potential ethical and regulatory implications of the situation. 2. Consulting relevant internal policies, codes of conduct, and external regulations. 3. Escalating concerns to appropriate subject matter experts, e.g., compliance, legal, data privacy officers, for guidance and resolution. 4. Documenting all actions taken and decisions made. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with the organization's commitment to ethical conduct and legal compliance. Question 4. The analysis reveals that a new dietary supplement, marketed for its purported cognitive enhancement benefits, is being considered for distribution by Walgreens Boots Alliance. While preliminary anecdotal evidence suggests positive outcomes, comprehensive, peer-reviewed clinical trials are still in their early stages, and have not yet met the stringent evidentiary standards required for health claims by the relevant regulatory bodies. Considering the diverse stakeholder interests, which approach best balances innovation, consumer welfare, and regulatory compliance. Option A. Delay the launch until robust clinical trial data is available and regulatory approval for specific health claims is secured, while continuing research and development. Option B. Launch the supplement immediately, leveraging early positive testimonials and focusing marketing on potential benefits while initiating further research to meet regulatory requirements post-launch. Option C. Partner with a third-party research institution to expedite the clinical trials, allowing for a faster launch with provisional marketing based on their preliminary findings. Option D. Market the supplement as a general wellness product without making specific cognitive enhancement claims, and provide disclaimers about the ongoing research. The correct answer is B. Launch the supplement immediately, leveraging early positive testimonials and focusing marketing on potential benefits, while initiating further research to meet regulatory requirements post-launch. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a pharmaceutical retailer, like Walgreens Boots Alliance, must balance the interests of various stakeholders when considering a new product launch that has potential, albeit unproven, health benefits. This is professionally challenging because it requires navigating conflicting priorities: the desire to innovate and offer new solutions to customers, shareholders, the need for rigorous scientific validation and regulatory compliance, stakeholder, regulators, public health, and the ethical obligation to provide accurate information and avoid misleading claims, stakeholder, customers, employees, public. Careful judgment is required to ensure that commercial interests do not override patient safety or ethical marketing practices. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes evidence-based decision-making and transparent communication. By conducting thorough clinical trials and adhering strictly to the regulatory approval processes of the relevant jurisdiction e.g., FDA in the U.S., the company demonstrates its commitment to patient well-being and scientific integrity. This aligns with the ethical principles of beneficence and non-maleficence, ensuring that any new product offered is safe and effective. Furthermore, proactive engagement with regulatory bodies and clear, evidence-backed communication with consumers build trust and uphold the company's reputation, which is a critical asset for all stakeholders. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the potential market demand and competitive advantage without sufficient scientific backing would be professionally unacceptable. This would represent a failure to uphold the duty of care to customers, potentially exposing them to ineffective or even harmful products. Such an approach would violate regulatory requirements concerning product claims and marketing, leading to potential fines, product recalls, and severe reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, which involves downplaying or omitting potential risks in marketing materials to boost sales, constitutes a direct ethical and regulatory violation. This is deceptive and erodes consumer trust, undermining the fundamental principles of fair trade and responsible business conduct. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive risk-benefit analysis, grounded in scientific evidence and regulatory guidelines. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders, understanding their interests and potential impacts, and prioritizing actions that uphold ethical standards and legal obligations. A robust process would include internal review by scientific and legal teams, consultation with external experts, and a commitment to transparency throughout the product development and launch phases. When faced with uncertainty, the precautionary principle should guide decisions, favoring caution and thorough validation over rapid market entry. Question 5. Process analysis reveals a patient presents a prescription for a Schedule IV controlled substance. The prescriber's phone number on the prescription is not immediately recognizable, and the patient expresses urgency, stating they are experiencing significant discomfort and have no other medication available. The pharmacy has a policy requiring verification of all controlled substance prescriptions with the prescriber if any information is unclear. Which of the following actions best aligns with professional and regulatory best practices? Option A. Politely explain to the patient that the prescription cannot be filled due to the unclear prescriber information and advise them to contact their doctor. Option B. Attempt to verify the prescription with the prescriber's office by calling the provided number or searching for an alternative contact number for the prescriber, and if verification is successful, dispense the medication. Option C, dispense the medication immediately to alleviate the patient's discomfort, making a note to verify the prescription with the prescriber later. Option D, dispense a partial quantity of the medication while attempting to verify the full prescription to provide immediate relief. The correct answer is C. Dispense the medication immediately to alleviate the patient's discomfort, making a note to verify the prescription with the prescriber later. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in a retail pharmacy setting where immediate patient needs can conflict with established operational procedures and potential regulatory requirements. The core tension lies between providing prompt care and ensuring all necessary checks and balances are in place, especially when dealing with controlled substances. The professional challenge is to balance patient well-being and access to medication with the legal and ethical obligations to prevent diversion and misuse. The correct approach prioritizes patient safety and regulatory compliance by seeking clarification and adhering to established protocols for controlled substance prescriptions. This represents best professional practice because it upholds the pharmacist's duty of care to the patient while simultaneously fulfilling their responsibility as a gatekeeper of controlled medications. It aligns with the fundamental principles of pharmacy practice, which emphasize accuracy, patient safety, and adherence to all applicable laws and regulations, including those governing controlled substances. This approach ensures that any dispensing occurs only after all necessary verification steps are completed, minimizing the risk of errors or illicit activity. An incorrect approach that bypasses verification steps to expedite dispensing would be professionally unacceptable due to significant regulatory and ethical failures. It would violate regulations pertaining to the dispensing of controlled substances, which often require specific verification of the prescription's legitimacy, the prescriber's identity, and the patient's need. Ethically, it would breach the pharmacist's duty to protect the public from the potential harms associated with controlled substance abuse and diversion. Another incorrect approach, such as refusing to dispense without any attempt to verify or offer alternatives, might be seen as failing in the duty of care, especially if the patient is in genuine need and the prescription is legitimate but has a minor discrepancy. While caution is necessary, an outright refusal without further investigation could be detrimental to patient health. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework when faced with such situations. This framework typically involves 1. Identifying the core issue and potential risks. 2. Consulting relevant policies, procedures, and regulations. 3. Gathering necessary information through verification and communication. 4. Evaluating the gathered information against established standards. 5. Making a decision that prioritizes patient safety and regulatory compliance. 6. Documenting the decision and the rationale. In this case, the pharmacist must recognize the controlled substance status, understand the potential risks, and follow the established protocol for verifying questionable prescriptions before dispensing. Question 6. The assessment process reveals a customer approaching the pharmacy counter requesting a refill of a prescription for a controlled substance. The customer states they have a valid prescription from their doctor, but do not have the physical prescription with them, and the pharmacy system does not show a recent refill authorization. The customer expresses urgency, stating they are experiencing significant pain and have run out of their medication. How should the pharmacy professional proceed? Option A. Politely explain the need to verify the prescription with the prescribing doctor and confirm the refill authorization before dispensing, prioritizing patient safety and regulatory compliance. Option B. Dispense a limited quantity of the medication based on the customer's word, with the understanding that they will bring in a physical prescription later. Option C. Refuse to dispense the medication outright, citing the lack of a physical prescription and system authorization, without attempting further verification. Option D. Dispense the medication immediately to alleviate the customer's pain and maintain good customer relations, assuming the customer is being truthful. The correct answer is A. Politely explain the need to verify the prescription with the prescribing doctor and confirm the refill authorization before dispensing, prioritizing patient safety and regulatory compliance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in a retail pharmacy setting where a customer's request, while seemingly straightforward, could have implications for patient safety and regulatory compliance. The pharmacist must balance customer service with their professional and legal obligations. The pressure to maintain customer satisfaction and potentially avoid negative reviews adds complexity to the decision-making process. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the situation, prioritizing patient safety and adherence to dispensing regulation. This includes verifying the prescription details, confirming the patient's identity and medical history, and ensuring the medication is appropriate and safe for the patient's current condition. This aligns with the professional duty of care and the legal requirements for dispensing prescription medications, which mandate that pharmacists act in the best interest of the patient and comply with all relevant pharmacy laws and regulations. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to dispense the medication without proper verification, assuming the customer is being truthful or that the request is routine. This fails to uphold the pharmacist's responsibility to ensure the accuracy and appropriateness of dispensed medications, potentially leading to dispensing errors, adverse drug events, or contraventions of dispensing regulations. It bypasses critical safety checks designed to protect patients. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately refuse the request without attempting to gather more information or understand the underlying need. Caution is necessary. An outright refusal without due diligence can be perceived as poor customer service and may prevent a legitimate patient from receiving necessary medication if there was a misunderstanding or a simple verification step was missed. This approach lacks the nuanced judgment required in professional practice. A third incorrect approach would be to dispense the medication based solely on the customer's assertion that they have a prescription from a specific doctor, without independently verifying the prescription's validity or the doctor's prescribing authority. This exposes the pharmacy to significant legal and ethical risks, as it could lead to dispensing controlled substances or other medications inappropriately, violating prescription verification laws, and potentially contributing to drug diversion or misuse. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with information gathering. This involves actively listening to the customer, asking clarifying questions, and consulting relevant resources, e.g., patient profiles, prescription databases, prescriber information. The next step is to assess the risks and benefits associated with the request, considering patient safety, legal compliance, and ethical obligations. Finally, the professional should make a decision based on this assessment, communicate it clearly and professionally to the customer, and document the interaction and decision-making process. Question 7. During the evaluation of a new over-the-counter medication for a common ailment, a pharmacist receives enthusiastic endorsements from the manufacturer regarding its efficacy and a significant sales incentive for promoting it. However, the pharmacist also notes some early, albeit limited, customer feedback, suggesting the medication may not be as effective as advertised and could cause mild side effects in a small percentage of users. The pharmacist must decide how to proceed with recommending this product to customers. Option A. Inform customers about the medication's potential effectiveness based on the manufacturer's claims, but avoid mentioning any customer feedback or potential side effects to prevent discouraging sales. Option B. Actively promote the medication to customers, highlighting the manufacturer's claims of high efficacy and focusing on the sales incentive, while downplaying any customer feedback that suggests otherwise. Option C. Conduct an independent review of available clinical data and any published studies on the medication. Consult professional resources for guidance on evaluating new products, and provide customers with a balanced perspective on its potential benefits and limitations, prioritizing their individual needs and health outcomes. Option D. Accept the manufacturer's assurances of efficacy and sales incentives as sufficient justification for recommending the product without further investigation, assuming any negative feedback is isolated. The correct answer is C. Conduct an independent review of available clinical data and any published studies on the medication. Consult professional resources for guidance on evaluating new products, and provide customers with a balanced perspective on its potential benefits and limitations, prioritizing their individual needs and health outcomes. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate business needs with long-term ethical considerations and potential regulatory implications. The pressure to meet sales targets can lead to overlooking or downplaying potential risks associated with a product. A pharmacist must exercise sound judgment to ensure patient safety and uphold professional standards, even when faced with commercial pressure. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes patient well-being and adherence to professional ethical guidelines. It involves a thorough, objective assessment of the product's efficacy and safety profile, considering all available evidence, including any emerging concerns. This aligns with the pharmacist's duty of care and the ethical obligation to act in the best interest of patients. It also reflects a commitment to responsible professional practice, which is implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that emphasize patient safety and professional integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves accepting the product's claims at face value without independent verification. This fails to meet the professional standard of due diligence and could lead to recommending an ineffective or potentially harmful product. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of commitment to patient welfare and a failure to exercise professional skepticism. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss emerging negative feedback as anecdotal or insignificant. This ignores potential warning signs and can lead to continued promotion of a product that may pose a risk to patients. It represents a failure to critically evaluate information and a disregard for potential adverse outcomes, which is contrary to professional responsibility. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize sales targets over patient safety. This is a clear ethical breach and a violation of the fundamental principles of the pharmacy profession. It suggests a conflict of interest where commercial gain supersedes the well-being of those the pharmacist is sworn to serve. Such a stance would be indefensible under any professional code of conduct. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core issue and potential stakeholders. This is followed by gathering all relevant information, including scientific data, professional guidelines, and any reported concerns. Next, potential courses of action are evaluated based on their ethical implications, professional standards, and potential impact on patient safety. Finally, the chosen course of action is implemented and reviewed for its effectiveness and any unintended consequences. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are well-reasoned, ethically sound, and professionally defensible. Question 8. The monitoring system demonstrates a discrepancy in inventory reconciliation for a specific high-value medication, with a noted variance attributed by the store manager to an unusual customer request that required a deviation from standard dispensing procedures to ensure immediate patient access. Option A. Investigate the specific customer request and the deviation from dispensing procedures, cross-referencing with Walgreens' internal policies on inventory management and patient care to determine if a policy violation occurred. Option B. Focus solely on the positive outcome of ensuring patient access to medication, disregarding the inventory variance as a minor operational issue. Option C. Report the discrepancy to senior management as a potential significant loss without attempting to gather further details or understand the context. Option D. Immediately accept the store manager's explanation as a customer service exception and close the inventory discrepancy without further review. The correct answer is A. Investigate the specific customer request and the deviation from dispensing procedures, cross-referencing with Walgreens' internal policies on inventory management and patient care to determine if a policy violation occurred. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term compliance and ethical considerations. The pressure to meet sales targets can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential policy breaches. The core difficulty lies in discerning when a deviation from standard procedure, even if seemingly minor or driven by customer satisfaction, crosses into a violation of Walgreens' internal policies and potentially relevant regulations. This requires a nuanced understanding of policy intent and a commitment to ethical conduct over short-term gains. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, objective investigation of the reported discrepancy. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing factual accuracy and adherence to established Walgreens policies and ethical guidelines. By seeking clarification from the relevant department and reviewing the specific policy in question, the individual demonstrates a commitment to understanding the full context and ensuring any action taken is compliant and justifiable. This proactive and investigative stance upholds the integrity of the decision-making process and protects both the individual and the company from potential regulatory or reputational damage. It reflects a decision-making framework that values due diligence and policy adherence. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately dismissing the discrepancy based on the assumption that it was a minor, customer service-driven exception. This fails to acknowledge the potential for policy violations and the importance of consistent application of rules. It represents an ethical failure by prioritizing expediency over thoroughness and could lead to a culture where policies are selectively enforced, creating an uneven playing field and potential compliance risks. This approach bypasses the necessary due diligence required by professional standards. Another incorrect approach is to escalate the issue without first attempting to gather more information or understand the context. While escalation can be appropriate, doing so prematurely without a basic understanding of the situation can lead to unnecessary alarm and misallocation of resources. It demonstrates a lack of independent judgment and an over-reliance on others to solve problems that might be resolvable with initial investigation. Ethically, it can be seen as shirking responsibility for initial problem solving. A further incorrect approach is to focus solely on the immediate customer satisfaction aspect without considering the broader implications for policy adherence and operational integrity. While customer service is crucial, it should not come at the expense of established procedures and ethical standards. This approach prioritizes a single interaction over the systemic implications of policy breaches, potentially undermining the effectiveness of internal controls and creating a precedent for future noncompliance. It represents a failure to apply a comprehensive decision-making framework that considers all relevant factors. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with information gathering and objective assessment. When faced with a discrepancy, the first step is to understand the facts. This involves reviewing relevant policies, seeking clarification from appropriate sources, and considering the context of the situation. Only after a thorough understanding has been established should a decision be made regarding the appropriate course of action, which may include corrective measures, policy review, or further escalation. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, ethical, and compliant with organizational standards and any applicable regulatory requirements. Question 9. Risk assessment procedures indicate a new, unverified supplement is being heavily promoted by a supplier, with claims of significant health benefits and high consumer interest. The sales team is eager to stock it to meet projected revenue targets. However, there is no readily available information confirming its approval by the MHRA or its inclusion on any recognized pharmaceutical register. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Decline to stock the product until independent verification confirms its regulatory compliance and safety profile, and consult with the company's legal and regulatory affairs departments. Option B. Stock a limited quantity of the product to test market demand, relying on the supplier's assurances regarding its quality. Option C. Stock the product immediately to capitalize on the high consumer interest and meet sales targets. Assuming the supplier's claims are accurate, Option D. Proceed with stocking the product after obtaining verbal confirmation from the supplier that it meets all necessary standards. The correct answer is A. Decline to stock the product until independent verification confirms its regulatory compliance and safety profile, and consult with the company's legal and regulatory affairs departments. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a product with potential long-term risks and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet sales targets can create a conflict of interest, potentially leading to shortcuts that compromise patient safety or adherence to pharmaceutical regulations. The decision-maker must navigate this by prioritizing ethical conduct and regulatory adherence over short-term gains. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the product's safety profile and regulatory status. This aligns with the fundamental ethical and regulatory obligations of a pharmaceutical retailer to ensure that all products dispensed are safe, effective, and compliant with relevant laws and guidelines. Specifically, this would involve consulting the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, MHRA guidelines, the General Pharmaceutical Council, GPHC Code of Conduct, and internal Walgreens Boots Alliance policies. Prioritizing patient safety and regulatory compliance ensures that the company upholds its professional responsibilities and maintains public trust. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to proceed with stocking the product solely based on its perceived market demand and the potential for increased sales. This fails to acknowledge the regulatory requirement for product approval and safety verification. It directly contravenes the GPHC's duty to protect public health and the MHRA mandate to ensure medicines are safe and effective. This approach prioritizes commercial interests over patient well-being and legal obligations. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on anecdotal evidence or the supplier's assurances without independent verification of the product's regulatory status. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adhere to the professional standards expected of a pharmacist or responsible manager. It bypasses the established regulatory pathways designed to safeguard the public and could lead to the distribution of substandard or unlicensed products, a serious breach of professional conduct and legal requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core issue and potential risks. This involves gathering all relevant information, including regulatory requirements, product data, and ethical considerations. The next step is to evaluate potential courses of action against these criteria, prioritizing patient safety and regulatory compliance. When faced with conflicting pressures, such as sales targets versus regulatory adherence, professionals must escalate concerns or seek guidance from senior management or regulatory bodies if they are unsure about the correct course of action. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are well-informed, ethically sound, and legally compliant. Question 10. Regulatory review indicates that in a customer interaction, a team member is presented with an opportunity to recommend a product that offers a higher commission but may not be the absolute best fit for the customer's stated needs, compared to a slightly less profitable but more suitable alternative. The team member is also aware of their monthly sales targets. Option A. Present both products, clearly outlining the pros and cons of each in relation to the customer's specific requirements and budget, allowing the customer to make an informed decision. Option B. Focus exclusively on the product that is most suitable for the customer's needs, regardless of its commission structure, and explain why it is the best option. Option C. Recommend the product that offers the highest commission, emphasizing its features that align with the customer's needs while subtly downplaying the benefits of the alternative. Option D. Recommend the most expensive product available, assuming that higher price equates to better quality and suitability for the customer. The correct answer is C. Recommend the product that offers the highest commission, emphasizing its features that align with the customer's needs while subtly downplaying the benefits of the alternative. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate business needs, meeting sales targets, and the ethical obligation to provide accurate and unbiased advice to customers. The pressure to achieve targets can create a temptation to prioritize sales over customer well-being, which is a common ethical dilemma in retail environments. Careful judgment is required to navigate this conflict and ensure that customer trust is maintained. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes customer well-being and adherence to ethical guidelines over short-term sales performance. This aligns with the principles of responsible business conduct and customer centricity, which are implicitly expected in professional settings. By offering a range of suitable options and clearly explaining their pros and cons, the professional demonstrates integrity and builds long-term customer loyalty, which is a more sustainable business strategy. This approach upholds the implicit duty of care owed to customers and avoids misleading them, thereby preventing potential reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves focusing solely on the product that offers the highest commission, even if it's not the most suitable for the customer's needs. This represents an ethical failure by prioritizing personal gain over customer welfare. It can lead to customer dissatisfaction, complaints, and potential breaches of consumer protection regulations if the product is misrepresented or unsuitable. Another incorrect approach is to downplay the benefits of a less profitable but more suitable product to steer the customer towards the higher commission item. This is a form of deception and a breach of professional integrity. It erodes customer trust and can lead to regulatory action for unfair or deceptive trade practices. A third incorrect approach is to simply push the most expensive product without adequately assessing the customer's needs or budget. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for the customer's financial situation. It can result in customer dissatisfaction and potential complaints about mis-selling. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the customer's needs and preferences. This should be followed by an objective assessment of available products, considering their suitability, benefits, and drawbacks for the specific customer. The decision should then be guided by ethical principles, prioritizing customer well-being and transparency. If there is a conflict between sales targets and ethical obligations, the ethical obligation must always take precedence. Professionals should be empowered to make decisions that align with these principles, even if it means foregoing an immediate sale. Question 11. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a minor compliance breach if a pharmacist expedites a prescription refill for a regular customer who is temporarily out of a non-controlled medication, but the customer expresses significant distress about being without it. The pharmacist has the discretion to approve the refill early based on established company policy for such situations, but doing so would slightly deviate from the standard refill schedule. Option A. Refuse the early refill and advise the customer to return on the scheduled refill date, suggesting they contact their doctor for an interim supply if the distress is severe. Option B. Approve the early refill without detailed documentation, assuming the customer's distress is sufficient justification for the deviation. Option C. Approve the early refill, documenting the customer's distress and the rationale for the deviation in the patient's record, and inform the customer of the standard refill schedule for future reference. Option D. Contact the customer's physician to request a new prescription for the medication, even though the current prescription is still valid and the medication is not controlled. The correct answer is C. Approve the early refill, documenting the customer's distress and the rationale for the deviation in the patient's record, and inform the customer of the standard refill schedule for future reference. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term compliance and ethical considerations, all within the context of a regulated industry. The pressure to meet sales targets can create a conflict of interest, potentially leading to decisions that compromise patient safety or regulatory adherence. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing priorities effectively. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes patient well-being and regulatory compliance above short-term financial gains. This aligns with the core ethical obligations of healthcare professionals and the stringent requirements of pharmaceutical regulations, which mandate that all decisions must ultimately serve the best interests of the patient. Adhering to established protocols and seeking guidance when unsure demonstrates a commitment to professional integrity and a robust understanding of the decision-making framework. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on meeting sales targets without considering the implications for patient care or regulatory adherence would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to violations of dispensing regulations, potentially resulting in patient harm and significant legal and reputational damage for both the individual and the organization. Another incorrect approach that involves circumventing established procedures or making assumptions about patient needs without proper consultation would also be a failure. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the established safeguards designed to protect patients and ensure compliance. Such actions could be construed as negligence or even intentional disregard for regulatory requirements. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core issue, gathering all relevant information, including patient history, prescription details, and company policies, assessing potential risks and benefits of each course of action, consulting with supervisors or relevant experts when necessary, and finally, making a decision that is ethically sound, legally compliant, and in the best interest of the patient. This framework emphasizes a proactive and responsible approach to problem solving. Question 12. The evaluation methodology shows that Walgreens Boots Alliance is considering implementing a new pharmacy management IT system. Which of the following approaches to assessing the impact of this change best aligns with regulatory requirements and ethical best practices for a healthcare organization? Option A. An evaluation that prioritizes the system's impact on the IT department's workload and support capabilities, with limited input from pharmacy operations staff. Option B. A comprehensive assessment that analyzes the system's effects on patient safety, data privacy, operational workflows, and staff training needs, alongside potential cost savings. Option C. A primary focus on the projected cost savings and efficiency gains, assuming that any operational challenges will be resolved organically after implementation. Option D. An assessment that exclusively examines the technical specifications and compatibility with existing IT infrastructure, with minimal consideration for user impact. The correct answer is B. A comprehensive assessment that analyzes the system's effects on patient safety, data privacy, operational workflows, and staff training needs, alongside potential cost savings. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term implications of a significant change. The introduction of a new IT system impacts numerous stakeholders, including pharmacy staff, patients, and potentially regulatory compliance. A thorough impact assessment is crucial to identify potential risks, unintended consequences, and necessary mitigation strategies before full implementation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically analyzes the potential effects of the new IT system across all relevant areas. This includes evaluating its impact on patient safety, e.g., medication dispensing accuracy, prescription processing times, data privacy and security, compliance with HIPAA or relevant data protection regulations, operational workflows, staff training needs, potential disruptions, and financial implications. By proactively identifying and addressing these impacts, the organization can ensure a smoother transition, minimize risks, and uphold its commitment to patient care and regulatory adherence. This aligns with ethical obligations to provide safe and effective services and legal requirements to protect patient data. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cost savings of the new system fails to consider the broader implications. This would be a regulatory and ethical failure, because it prioritizes financial gain over patient safety and operational integrity, could lead to dispensing errors, data breaches, or significant staff dissatisfaction, all of which have serious consequences. Another incorrect approach that assumes the system will be self-explanatory and require no additional training ignores the practical realities of technology adoption. This is a failure to adequately plan for operational changes, potentially leading to system misuse, reduced efficiency, and non-compliance with operational procedures, which could indirectly impact patient care. Finally, an approach that only considers the impact on IT support staff overlooks the critical frontline users and the patients they serve. This narrow focus is a significant ethical lapse, as it neglects the primary beneficiaries of pharmacy services and the individuals most directly affected by system changes. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the scope of the change and its objectives. This should be followed by a comprehensive impact assessment that considers all potential effects on people, processes, technology, and compliance. Stakeholder engagement is vital throughout this process to gather diverse perspectives and ensure buy-in. Based on the assessment, a robust mitigation plan should be developed, including training, communication, and contingency measures. Regular monitoring and evaluation post-implementation are also essential to adapt and address any unforeseen issues. Question 13. Implementation of a new digital prescription management system is being considered to improve efficiency and reduce errors. What is the most comprehensive approach to assessing the potential impacts of this system before its rollout? Option A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that includes operational efficiency, financial implications, technological integration, patient safety, data privacy, employee training needs, and potential effects on patient access to medications. Option B. Delegate the entire impact assessment to the IT department to ensure technical accuracy and efficiency. Option C. Expedite the implementation by focusing only on the technical aspects of the system and assuming minimal impact on other areas. Option D. Prioritize the assessment of technological compatibility and cost savings, as these are the primary drivers for system adoption. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that includes operational efficiency, financial implications, technological integration, patient safety, data privacy, employee training needs, and potential effects on patient access to medications. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the desire to quickly implement a new system for efficiency gains and the critical need to thoroughly assess its potential impact on various stakeholders, including patients, employees, and the company's regulatory compliance. The pressure to innovate and remain competitive can sometimes lead to overlooking potential negative consequences, making a robust impact assessment process essential for responsible business practice. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multifaceted impact assessment that considers operational, financial, technological, and, crucially, patient and employee impacts. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing patient safety and well-being, which is a core ethical and regulatory imperative for any healthcare-related organization. A thorough assessment ensures that potential risks are identified and mitigated before implementation, preventing adverse events, regulatory breaches, and reputational damage. This proactive approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible innovation and stakeholder welfare, aligning with principles of good corporate governance and ethical conduct expected within the pharmaceutical and retail healthcare sectors. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that solely focuses on technological feasibility and cost savings without adequately considering patient safety or employee workflow disruptions is professionally unacceptable. This represents a significant regulatory failure by potentially overlooking requirements related to patient data privacy, e.g., HIPAA in the U.S. context, or GDPR if applicable to data handling, accessibility of services, and the impact on the quality of patient care. Ethically, it prioritizes financial gain over patient well-being and employee welfare, an approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thoroughness, skipping key stakeholder consultations and impact analyses, is also professionally flawed. This can lead to unforeseen operational issues, resistance from staff, and ultimately, a system that does not meet its intended objectives or, worse, creates new problems. This approach risks violating internal policies and potentially external regulations that mandate stakeholder engagement or require evidence of due diligence in system changes that affect service delivery. An approach that delegates the entire impact assessment to a single department without cross-functional oversight or input from those directly interacting with patients or managing frontline operations is incomplete. This siloed approach can lead to blind spots, where critical impacts on patient experience or employee usability are missed. It fails to meet the professional standard of comprehensive risk management and can result in non-compliance with regulations that require a holistic understanding of system implementation effects. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with identifying the core objective of the proposed change. This should be followed by a systematic identification of all potential stakeholders and the various types of impacts, positive and negative, the change might have on them. A risk assessment framework should then be applied to prioritize potential negative impacts. Mitigation strategies should be developed for high-priority risks. Finally, a plan for monitoring and evaluating the actual impact post-implementation should be established. This iterative and inclusive process ensures that decisions are informed, responsible, and aligned with both regulatory requirements and ethical obligations. Question 14. Benchmark analysis indicates that a new company-wide policy on data privacy is being implemented. Which approach to assessing the potential impact of this policy would best align with robust risk management and ethical considerations for Walgreens Boots Alliance? Option A. Focusing primarily on the immediate cost savings associated with reduced data storage and the projected increase in marketing efficiency due to more targeted campaigns. Option B. Prioritizing the speed of implementation by conducting a brief overview of the policy's main points and assuming minimal disruption to current operations. Option C. Relying on informal discussions with a few department heads and a quick review of existing privacy statements to gauge potential reactions. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive assessment that analyzes potential effects on customer trust, employee training needs, IT infrastructure requirements, and regulatory compliance across all relevant jurisdictions, utilizing both quantitative data and qualitative feedback from diverse departments. The correct answer is D. Conducting a comprehensive assessment that analyzes potential effects on customer trust, employee training needs, IT infrastructure requirements, and regulatory compliance across all relevant jurisdictions, utilizing both quantitative data and qualitative feedback from diverse departments. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent uncertainty in predicting the full impact of a new policy on a large, diverse organization like Walgreens Boots Alliance. The challenge lies in moving beyond superficial observations to a comprehensive understanding of potential consequences across various operational, financial, and ethical dimensions. Careful judgment is required to identify potential risks and opportunities that might not be immediately apparent, ensuring that the impact assessment is thorough and actionable. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted impact assessment that considers both quantitative and qualitative factors. This includes analyzing potential effects on customer behavior, employee morale and productivity, supply chain efficiency, regulatory compliance, and brand reputation. By employing a range of analytical tools and engaging diverse stakeholders, this approach ensures a holistic view, identifying potential unintended consequences and informing proactive mitigation strategies. This aligns with best professional practice by promoting informed decision-making, risk management, and ethical considerations, ensuring that the organization acts responsibly and strategically. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on immediate financial projections, neglecting broader operational and ethical implications. This fails to meet regulatory expectations for comprehensive risk assessment and can lead to unforeseen negative consequences, such as reputational damage or employee dissatisfaction, which can ultimately impact financial performance. Another incorrect approach relies heavily on anecdotal evidence and informal feedback without systematic data collection or analysis. This approach is professionally unacceptable as it lacks objectivity and rigor, making it difficult to identify systemic issues or validate findings. It risks overlooking critical impacts that affect significant portions of the business or its stakeholders, potentially leading to noncompliance with ethical guidelines or regulatory requirements for due diligence. A third incorrect approach prioritizes speed and simplicity over thoroughness, opting for a superficial review of readily available information. This is professionally unsound, as it bypasses the due diligence necessary to understand the true scope of potential impacts. It can result in a flawed assessment that fails to identify significant risks or opportunities, potentially exposing the organization to regulatory penalties or ethical breaches due to inadequate foresight. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the scope and objectives of the impact assessment. This involves identifying key stakeholders, relevant data sources, and appropriate analytical methodologies. The process should then move to data collection and analysis, followed by the synthesis of findings and the development of actionable recommendations. Finally, a critical step is the communication of results and the establishment of mechanisms for ongoing monitoring and review, ensuring that the assessment remains relevant and effective. Question 15. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a proposed cost-saving initiative involves sharing anonymized customer data with a third-party analytics firm. While the firm claims robust anonymization techniques, the potential for re-identification, however remote, exists. Which of the following actions best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical obligations concerning data protection? Option A. Rely solely on the third-party analytics firm's internal compliance documentation regarding their anonymization methods without independent verification. Option B. Implement the data sharing and address any data protection concerns that may arise after the process has begun. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment, DPIA, to evaluate the risks associated with the data sharing, including the effectiveness of the anonymization process and potential re-identification risks, and implement mitigation strategies before proceeding. Option D. Proceed with sharing the data immediately, as the firm has assured that the data is anonymized and therefore falls outside the scope of data protection regulations. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment, DPIA, to evaluate the risks associated with the data sharing, including the effectiveness of the anonymization process and potential re-identification risks, and implement mitigation strategies before proceeding. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for cost savings with the long-term implications of data privacy and regulatory compliance. The pressure to reduce expenses can lead to shortcuts that, while seemingly efficient, could expose the company to significant legal and reputational risks. The complexity arises from understanding the nuances of data handling, the specific requirements of the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, as it applies to a multinational company like Walgreens Boots Alliance, and the ethical imperative to protect customer information. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach, which involves a thorough impact assessment of the proposed data sharing mechanism against GDPR principles, represents best professional practice. This aligns with Article 35 of the GDPR, which mandates data protection impact assessments, DPIA, for processing operations likely to result in a high risk to the rights and freedoms of natural persons. A DPIA systematically identifies and mitigates risks to data protection. It ensures that the proposed data sharing is not only cost-effective, but also lawful, fair, and transparent, respecting individuals' privacy rights. This proactive approach demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical data stewardship. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the data sharing without any formal assessment, relying solely on the vendor's assurances of compliance. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It breaches Article 5 of the GDPR, which mandates data processing to be lawful, fair, and transparent, and requires data to be collected for specified, explicit, and legitimate purposes, and not further processed in a manner that is incompatible with those purposes. Relying on vendor assurances without independent verification is a failure of due diligence and accountability, potentially leading to unauthorized data use or breaches. Another incorrect approach is to implement the data sharing immediately and address any potential data protection issues reactively. This is a direct violation of the GDPR principles of data protection by design and by default, Article 25. It demonstrates a disregard for the potential harm to individuals whose data is being processed and exposes the company to substantial fines for noncompliance. This reactive stance is ethically irresponsible and legally perilous. A third incorrect approach is to assume that because the data is anonymized, it falls outside the scope of GDPR. While anonymized data is not personal data, the process of anonymization itself must be robust and irreversible. If the data is only pseudonymized, or if there is a risk of re-identification, it remains subject to GDPR. Failing to verify the effectiveness of the anonymization process and assuming it negates all GDPR obligations is a critical regulatory failure, potentially leading to breaches of Article 4.5, which defines anonymization. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, prioritizing compliance and ethical considerations. When faced with a proposal that impacts data handling, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying potential data protection risks associated with the proposed action. 2. Consulting relevant regulations, in this case, GDPR and internal policies. 3. Conducting a formal impact assessment, like a DPIA, to evaluate these risks. 4. Implementing appropriate technical and organizational measures to mitigate identified risks. 5. Seeking legal and data protection expert advice where necessary. 6. Documenting the entire process and decision-making rationale. This structured approach ensures that business objectives are pursued responsibly, safeguarding both the company and the individuals whose data is entrusted to it. Question 16. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of the potential consequences of new initiatives. If Walgreens Boots Alliance is considering introducing a novel telehealth service for prescription refills, what is the most appropriate initial step to ensure responsible implementation and compliance with healthcare regulations? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive impact assessment to identify potential effects on patient care, data security, operational workflows, and regulatory compliance, and develop mitigation strategies. Option B. Immediately launch the telehealth service to capture market share, assuming any issues can be addressed reactively. Option C. Conduct a brief internal review focusing only on the projected revenue increase from the new service. Option D. Consult with a small group of loyal customers to gauge their interest in the service. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive impact assessment to identify potential effects on patient care, data security, operational workflows, and regulatory compliance, and develop mitigation strategies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the potential benefits of a new initiative against its potential negative impacts on various stakeholders, including patients, employees, and the company's reputation. Walgreens Boots Alliance operates in a highly regulated environment, making any strategic shift subject to scrutiny under relevant healthcare and business laws. The challenge lies in proactively identifying and mitigating risks before they materialize, ensuring compliance, and maintaining public trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically evaluates the potential consequences of the proposed new pharmacy service. This includes identifying all affected parties, anticipating both positive and negative outcomes, and developing mitigation strategies for any identified risks. This aligns with best professional practice by demonstrating due diligence, a commitment to patient safety and welfare, and adherence to regulatory requirements that often mandate risk assessment and management for new services. It also supports ethical obligations to operate responsibly and transparently. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to proceed with the new service without any formal assessment, relying solely on anecdotal evidence or the perceived demand. This fails to meet regulatory obligations that may require documented risk assessments and impact analyses for new healthcare services. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for potential harm to patients and employees, prioritizing expediency over safety and compliance. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial assessment that only considers the financial benefits and ignores potential operational or patient care disruptions. This is professionally unacceptable as it neglects critical aspects of impact, such as patient access, data privacy, and employee workload, which are often subject to specific regulations and ethical considerations. It also fails to identify and address potential compliance gaps. A third incorrect approach would be to focus the assessment solely on internal operational efficiency without considering the broader external impacts on the community or regulatory landscape. This is flawed because it overlooks potential negative externalities, such as increased wait times for existing services or unintended consequences for vulnerable patient populations, which could lead to regulatory noncompliance and reputational damage. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, proactive approach to impact assessment. This involves defining the scope of the assessment, identifying all relevant stakeholders, employing a range of analytical tools and methodologies to predict potential impacts, and developing clear action plans for mitigation and monitoring. This framework ensures that strategic decisions are informed, responsible, and compliant with all applicable regulations and ethical standards. Question 17. Investigation of a suspected data breach at a retail pharmacy chain has revealed that a third-party vendor managing customer loyalty program data may have experienced unauthorized access. The IT security team has detected unusual network activity originating from the vendor's servers. What is the most appropriate initial course of action to manage this potential incident? Option A. Immediately initiate containment measures on the pharmacy chain's internal network and systems to prevent any potential lateral movement of threats, while simultaneously commencing a detailed impact assessment to understand the scope and nature of the potential breach. Option B. Halt all operations related to the loyalty program and cease all communication with the third-party vendor until the full extent of the breach is definitively determined. Option C. Issue a public statement acknowledging a potential data breach and begin notifying all customers and relevant regulatory bodies to ensure transparency and compliance. Option D. Focus exclusively on strengthening the pharmacy chain's internal cybersecurity defenses and wait for the third-party vendor to provide a complete report on the incident. The correct answer is A. Immediately initiate containment measures on the pharmacy chain's internal network and systems to prevent any potential lateral movement of threats, while simultaneously commencing a detailed impact assessment to understand the scope and nature of the potential breach. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need to address a potential data breach and the requirement to conduct a thorough impact assessment before making significant decisions. The pressure to act quickly can lead to hasty, potentially misguided actions that could exacerbate the situation or violate regulatory obligations. Careful judgment is required to balance urgency with due diligence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves initiating an immediate containment strategy to prevent further unauthorized access or disclosure of sensitive information. Simultaneously, a comprehensive impact assessment must be launched to understand the scope, nature, and potential consequences of the breach. This dual approach ensures that immediate risks are mitigated while gathering the necessary information to make informed decisions about notification, remediation, and regulatory reporting, aligning with best practices for data protection and incident response. This aligns with principles of data minimization and security by design, as well as the need for a structured incident response plan. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately notify all potentially affected individuals and regulatory bodies without first understanding the scope and nature of the breach. This premature notification could cause unnecessary panic, damage reputation, and lead to reporting inaccuracies, potentially violating regulatory requirements for timely and accurate reporting. It also bypasses the crucial step of impact assessment, which informs the appropriate level of notification. Another incorrect approach would be to delay any action, including containment, until the full impact assessment is completed. This inaction would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it allows the potential breach to continue unchecked, increasing the risk of further data compromise and harm to individuals. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to uphold the duty of care owed to customers and stakeholders. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on technical remediation, without considering the broader impact on individuals and regulatory obligations. While technical fixes are important, they do not address the full spectrum of consequences, such as reputational damage, potential legal liabilities, or the need for specific regulatory notifications. This narrow focus neglects the holistic nature of data breach response. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident response framework that prioritizes containment, followed by a rapid yet thorough impact assessment. This assessment should inform subsequent actions, including notification, remediation, and communication strategies. Decision-making should be guided by regulatory requirements, e.g., data protection laws, ethical considerations, duty of care, transparency, and business continuity objectives. A clear incident response plan, regularly tested and updated, is crucial for effective management of such events. Question 18. What factors determine the scope and depth of an impact assessment for a new patient-facing pharmacy service that involves novel technology and data handling procedures? Option A. The success of similar technologies in unrelated retail sectors. Option B. The potential impact on patient safety, data privacy and security, regulatory compliance, operational efficiency, and financial viability. Option C. The cost-effectiveness of the new service compared to existing offerings. Option D. The perceived enthusiasm of the pharmacy team for adopting new technologies. The correct answer is B. The potential impact on patient safety, data privacy and security, regulatory compliance, operational efficiency, and financial viability. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge where a new pharmacy service, while potentially beneficial to patients, introduces novel risks that require a thorough assessment before implementation. The core difficulty lies in balancing innovation and patient care with the imperative to comply with regulatory standards and maintain operational integrity. This requires a nuanced understanding of potential impacts across various domains, not just immediate patient outcomes. The correct approach emphasizes a comprehensive impact assessment that considers all relevant stakeholders and potential consequences. This aligns with best professional practice by proactively identifying and mitigating risks, ensuring patient safety, and upholding regulatory compliance. Specifically, it reflects the ethical duty of care and the legal obligations to operate within established frameworks. A thorough assessment allows for informed decision-making, resource allocation, and the development of appropriate safeguards, thereby minimizing the likelihood of adverse events or regulatory breaches. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate patient benefit without considering broader operational or regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to unintended consequences, such as increased workload for staff without adequate support, potential data privacy breaches if new systems are not secure, or non-compliance with dispensing regulations. Such an approach demonstrates a failure to adhere to the principle of due diligence and a disregard for the holistic responsibilities of a pharmacy operation. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost savings above all else, even at the expense of thorough risk evaluation, is also professionally unsound. This can lead to cutting corners on essential safety measures or training, directly contravening regulatory requirements for patient safety and quality of care. It also risks reputational damage and potential legal repercussions if patient harm or regulatory violations occur. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the experiences of other, dissimilar organizations without conducting a specific assessment for the current context is flawed. While external insights can be valuable, they do not substitute for a tailored analysis of the unique operational environment, patient population, and regulatory landscape of Walgreens Boots Alliance. This can lead to the adoption of practices that are either insufficient to address local risks or unnecessarily burdensome. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This typically includes identifying potential hazards associated with the new service, analyzing the likelihood and impact of these hazards, evaluating existing controls, determining the level of residual risk, and implementing further mitigation strategies as necessary. This process should be iterative and involve input from relevant departments, including pharmacy operations, legal, compliance, and IT, to ensure all facets of the impact are considered. Question 19. When evaluating a customer's request for advice on a complementary wellness product while they are at the prescription counter, and the pharmacist has access to the customer's prescription history, which of the following represents the most appropriate and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Directly recommend a specific brand of wellness supplement that is currently on promotion, referencing how it might complement their recently filled prescription to encourage a purchase. Option B. Provide general information about the benefits of various wellness product categories and suggest the customer discuss specific product choices with their physician or a qualified healthcare provider without referencing their current prescription. Option C. Suggest a wellness product based on a promotional flyer seen earlier, without considering the customer's specific health conditions or prescription details. Option D. Politely inform the customer that you cannot offer advice on wellness products, as it falls outside the scope of prescription dispensing services. Correct answer is B. Provide general information about the benefits of various wellness product categories and suggest the customer discuss specific product choices with their physician or a qualified healthcare provider without referencing their current prescription. Explanation. The scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in a retail pharmacy setting, specifically concerning the handling of a customer's personal health information, FI, and potential conflicts of interest. The challenge lies in balancing the need to provide excellent customer service and potentially increase sales with the paramount duty to protect patient privacy and adhere to professional standards. A pharmacist must navigate the line between offering helpful advice and making inappropriate recommendations based on information obtained through their professional role. The correct approach prioritizes patient privacy and professional integrity. It involves responding to the customer's inquiry in a general, informative manner without leveraging specific prescription data for sales purposes. This aligns with the ethical obligations of pharmacists to act in the best interest of their patients and to maintain confidentiality, as well as regulatory requirements such as HIPAA in the United States, which strictly governs the use and disclosure of PHI. By focusing on general wellness advice and directing the customer to appropriate resources or their physician, the pharmacist upholds professional standards and avoids any appearance of impropriety or exploitation of patient information. An incorrect approach that involves referencing the customer's specific prescription history to recommend a particular brand of supplement or over-the-counter product represents a significant breach of privacy and a potential conflict of interest. This action could violate HIPAA regulations by disclosing PHI without proper authorization and could be seen as an unethical attempt to upsell based on sensitive personal health data. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the customer's inquiry without offering any assistance, fails to meet the professional standard of care and customer service expected of a pharmacist, potentially damaging the pharmacy's reputation and customer trust. Finally, an approach that involves suggesting a product solely based on a promotional flyer without considering the customer's specific needs or prescription history, even if not directly referencing PHI, still risks offering inappropriate advice and could be seen as prioritizing sales over patient well-being. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical and regulatory principles at play, such as patient confidentiality, professional integrity, and the duty of care. They should then assess the potential consequences of each possible action, considering both the impact on the patient and the pharmacy. When in doubt, seeking guidance from a supervisor or consulting relevant professional guidelines and regulations is crucial. The guiding principle should always be to act in a manner that protects the patient's best interests and upholds the highest ethical and professional standards. Question 20. The assessment process reveals that a marketing team at Walgreens Boots Alliance is proposing to use customer purchase history data collected through the loyalty program to develop targeted advertising campaigns for new product lines. The data is currently stored in a way that can be linked back to individual customer accounts. The team believes that since the data was collected for program participation, it can be implicitly used for marketing related to other products. Considering the regulatory framework applicable to Walgreens Boots Alliance's operations in the United States, which of the following approaches best aligns with professional and ethical data handling practices? Option A. Utilize the purchase history data for targeted marketing without seeking additional consent, based on the assumption that loyalty program members expect to receive marketing communications. Option B. Anonymize the purchase history data and then use it for targeted marketing, assuming that anonymized data no longer falls under privacy regulations. Option C. Proceed with using the purchase history data for targeted marketing, as the terms and conditions of the loyalty program broadly permit the use of member data for marketing purposes. Option D. Obtain explicit, opt-in consent from loyalty program members for their purchase history data to be used for targeted marketing of new product lines. The correct answer is D. Obtain explicit, opt-in consent from loyalty program members for their purchase history data to be used for targeted marketing of new product lines. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to leverage data for business advantage and the stringent privacy obligations imposed by regulatory frameworks. The need to balance innovation with compliance requires careful ethical consideration and a thorough understanding of data protection principles. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes obtaining explicit, informed consent from individuals before using their personal data for marketing purposes. This aligns directly with the principles of data protection, such as purpose limitation and data minimization, which are fundamental to regulations like the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. If this were a U.S.-based assessment, or similar privacy laws applicable in the U.S. context, obtaining consent ensures that individuals are aware of how their data will be used and have the agency to agree or refuse, thereby upholding their privacy rights. This proactive approach mitigates legal risks and fosters trust with customers. An incorrect approach that involves using aggregated, anonymized data without consent for marketing purposes is professionally unacceptable. While anonymization can reduce privacy risks, the initial collection of personal data for a different purpose, e.g., loyalty program, and then repurposing it for marketing without explicit consent can still violate data protection principles. Regulations often require that data be collected for specified, explicit, and legitimate purposes, and not further processed in a manner incompatible with those purposes. Even if anonymized, the original collection and subsequent use for a new purpose without consent can be problematic. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with using the data for marketing based on a broad interpretation of terms and conditions that were not clearly communicated or understood by the customer, is also professionally unacceptable. It circumvents the spirit of informed consent and can lead to breaches of trust and regulatory penalties. Terms and conditions, while legally binding, must be transparent and easily understandable to be considered truly effective for obtaining consent for data processing activities. A further incorrect approach, which is to assume that because the data was collected for one purpose, it can be used for any other related purpose without further consent, demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of data privacy obligations. This function creep is a common pitfall and is often explicitly prohibited by data protection laws. Each distinct processing activity, especially for marketing, typically requires a separate legal basis, often explicit consent. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the applicable data protection laws and ethical guidelines. This includes 1. Identifying the type of data being processed and its sensitivity. 2. Determining the purpose of the processing. 3. Identifying the legal basis for processing, e.g., consent, legitimate interest, contract. 4. Assessing the risks to individuals' privacy. 5. Implementing appropriate safeguards and transparency measures. And 6. Seeking legal counsel when in doubt. A proactive privacy by design approach is crucial.